Hello everybody and welcome back to the Overlap Breakdown channel. Now today we are here to cover Ederson to Manchester United, which looks all but done for £38 million to Manchester United, and it's a reported fee, a reported wage rather, of 75 grand a week, which on face value has a lot of fans, questioning whether or not this is a good deal in terms of, is it the right money to be spent? Is he a first choice midfielder? Is he the third of potentially three midfielders to come in? And how does he fit into Manchester United? And today we are here to cover everything about him, talking about his role at Atalanta, the role he will play at Manchester United, his strengths, his weaknesses, more importantly, how to mask them and stuff like that. But just before we get involved, obviously, again, support has been absolutely incredible throughout the entire of May. And yeah, I can't thank you lads enough. And going into obviously the busiest part of the season, it makes it so much easier of a job when people like yourself watching this who are constantly, liking, commenting, subscribing, getting involved. So yeah, I can't thank you enough. But obviously, as everyone knows on the channel, I am a Manchester United fan. And this is a signing that we're actually a bit late on it in terms of the breaking news. And it's because I've spent a ridiculous amount of time watching Ederson at Atalanta over the last couple of years on Scout, just doing my due diligence on everything. And there's a lot to be said about this midfield. There's a lot of pros and cons to go through. There's a lot of people saying it's an absolute travesty we're spending this money. There's a lot of people saying it's a good squad fit. And I'm going to give my opinion today. And just before we obviously kick it off with all the analysis and everything involved, I have gone and sourced the league data from the season just gone, the 25-26, per 90 of every single midfielder at Manchester United, plus an Ederson column. And I'll throw that up on your screen right now, and we can see the stats that are highlighted in green on your screen are the stats that obviously that one midfielder tops. So we can see that Bruno Fernandes literally, trumps pretty much every single metric at Manchester United. But there is a few metrics I want to show you and talk about why he could actually do a decent job at Manchester United. And the ones I want to throw onto your screen straight away are his expected goals total is joint second. He has the exact same expected goals total per 90 as Casemiro, despite only having 0.08 goals per 90 in comparison to 0.31 for Casemiro. Now, I will go more into speaking about his goal output and what to expect of him. But just throughout the list, we can see that his passing accuracy is 89%, which is the most out of any Manchester United midfielder plus himself. And going on from that, his dual success win rate is at a 53.6%, which is the most out of him and every other Manchester United midfielder currently employed at the club. And his possession won is also per 90 the best between him and every other Manchester United midfielder. And yeah, I want to throw this on into talking about what he's doing at Atalanta. But before we do that, I just want to stress enough about Ederson and something that is really easily overlooked. But when we think about Manchester United midfielders, you need them to always be available. Now, in every game that Ederson has been at Atalanta, he's only missed 10 games through injury. So I always say this on the channel, we do interview, professionals in this field. Availability is the best ability. And we're going into a season where we are going to be playing 3 times a week, most likely. And the squad needs bolstering with not only quality, yes, but availability. And as we've just said, that is the best quality. So I have to throw this on now and talk about his strengths and weaknesses, and I'm going to cover his profile in depth. But for me, I think from what's being said from a lot of people, I think he's a very different midfielder to what people are saying. So oftentimes, Atalanta have always played this 3-4-3. The front line often changes, but it's usually the two in here. He's been partnered with Martin de Roon most recently. Coop Miners has been there under Gasperini, etc. And he mostly plays as this left central midfielder. Now, his role has changed throughout managers, so we can get a good idea of what he's trying to do on and off the ball. Now, for me, I'll go on straight away and speak about him on the ball. On the ball, I want to throw this out to Manchester United fans. I don't think he's reliable in terms of a comfortable ball-playing midfielder. I don't think you're going to be expecting a midfielder. We'll talk about his setup in this Manchester United 4-2-3-1. But at Atalanta, I don't expect him to come and show for the ball in the midfield here, right on the edge of the box, take it, swivel out. I don't think that is what Ederson's strengths are. And when I do want to highlight that, I'm talking about his overall technical ability on the ball is decent, but it's not something I value him the most for. I don't think he's press resistant. I don't think he's a player who, if we're talking about Premier League pressure, when he's got this on his back, I don't think he's going to be someone who can knock the ball into one of these, pocket players after spinning. He's very much a player who likes to play simple wall passes. And a wall pass is basically sending it back from where it's come from. So if he receives that pressure on his back from an opposition player like this, most of the time when the ball comes here, he's sending it back over here or back to where it's come from. And that is what for me, his vast majority of his possessions look like against a high pressing opposition. And I want to stress this enough. I have watched him so much now. I watched him in like 5 different Champions League games. Watched him against Madrid, Chelsea, Bilbao, Sporting in the Europa League, which is funnily enough coached by Ruben Amorim against him, just to see how his technical ability evolves in the Champions League games. He looks better in the Serie A, and I don't think it's because the Serie A is a slow-paced league. I just don't think they have top 1%, top 10%, physical midfielders to push up against him and really start to ruffle his feathers. But for me, his best attributes are facing forward with the play, and I think he's rapid. I think he is someone who I've watched across multiple different games in Europe. I think he has extremely good physicality, someone who is always available, but his robustness, his acceleration, his first step, his ability to knock it past the player, and I'm talking like if we're looking to play a 1-2, his ability to pass it off and make a run late into the opposition's box and attack with depth in the final third is something that I really value him for. And I know a lot of people might be thinking that this is the Casemiro replacement. It is not, in my opinion. I'd be shocked if it is. I think this is the Manuel Ugarte replacement. And for me, I watched Manuel Ugarte a lot when he was signed. I wasn't a massive fan. He is better than Ugarte. And I know that's not a tough, argument to win, but I do think he's better. I think he has standout physical attributes that will make him a good Premier League player and someone who, in the last few weeks of talking about him, would fit in so well at a forward-facing, high-pressing team, and I'm talking like a Newcastle. I think he's a very much Tonali mould. I love the way he passes the ball forward, but then I love his deep runs, and his off-the-ball runs are immaculate, in my opinion. I think this is someone who could be much more of an attacking outlet than a defensive one. That is without obviously saying that he's a pretty good dueler, a very good dueler. He's a chaotic midfielder, but he has good shoulder-to-shoulder play. He can win the ball in the air, he can win the ball on the floor. He's got a pretty decent sense of how to use his body, but I do want to touch on this attacking with depth and why I think that his 21 goal involvements in 150 plus Serie A games is something that can be developed on in the Premier League because it suits what Man United need in terms of a replacement for Casemiro, but it also suits how much more transitional the Premier League is. So on your screen right now, we've got a goal that he scored against Lecce, he had against Lecce. And we can see that his position here is just outside of the opposition's defensive shape. He's playing that holding role. Now, when he gets the ball here, he's looking to knock it ahead of play. Very, very short distance pass. So we're talking something like having this close proximity availability here. So if someone's playing in there, you're looking to knock it in, and then he's not going to sit here as this conductor. He is going to make runs ahead of the ball like this. And in this example, we can see that happen right there. He knocks the ball in, he receives the ball, gets it on the edge of the box. He takes a really, really wicked strike against the keeper. It's a good save. Moving on to the next one, I've got one here against Verona, and this is now showing his pace, his acceleration, his first couple of steps. We look at this right here. I want to highlight on your screen, he is pretty much the deepest player for Atalanta here on 1731. Now, throughout these screenshots when they're playing on your screen, look how many players he runs past with that off-the-ball movement. He crashed into the final third, and he ends receiving this all within about 3 or 4 different passes. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think this is going to be something that you'll see a lot in the Premier League. I'm talking about him just clearing through 6 bodies. But if I'm talking about him translating to the Premier League, it was reported that Manchester United were looking at a Sandro Tonali-like midfielder, and then it almost, dwindled out because the finances weren't there. He does remind me a little bit of a Tonali-like, scruffy, scrappy, really good off the ball, can win a duel. He's not perfect technically. He's not going to come and get the ball here. This is not where he works best. And I want to stress enough that if we do see him in these areas for Manchester United, he will look pretty suspect at times because under pressure, he's not a very extravagant passer. I've got some stats here that say, obviously, his progressive passes per 90 are 3.2, which is the 49th most across all Serie A players. And we can see that when we compare that to all of other United's midfielders, in fact, Bruno, Casemiro all have more. Them two have more. So he's not going to be someone who is going to fire passes through the lines. He's not going to break lines consistently for Manchester United. But when it comes to the carries, he has the joint 140th most in the Serie A, which is 6 progressive carries, which Bruno, and almost Ugarte have more than him. But for me, it's actually his runs without the ball that are really, really, encouraging for me in Manchester United. And I think I look at Manchester United and what they've lost in Casemiro. I think we lack a player to break into the box. I'm not going to generalise. I'm not going to say he's like Scott McTominay, but at Manchester United, Scott McTominay was often this player who wouldn't really touch the ball much in deeper areas, but because he was profiled as a deeper midfielder. But when the ball got pushed into the final third, you do see them elements of that striker in him. And I know it sounds crazy because he's not scored that many goals in the Serie A. But if I'm talking about his standout attributes, when we talk about platforming into Manchester United, these are the things that I look at the most. When I look at Ederson, I go, that stands out for me. That is what's pushing him, to the end. And I think having the joint second best expected goals when we look at across Manchester United's midfield, he has the same expected goals return per 90 as Casemiro. And whilst the goals do not replicate that, aspect of his game, it's really important to suggest that he actually is generating quite a lot of chances with receiving the ball in the box for them runs. And yeah, I think this could be a player platformed well that you could see the most out of him. He could be that late box runner. He could be that box to box that Manchester United have been looking for. But technically for me, and I'm talking in tight spaces, under pressure, I don't think he's that great of a player. I do think, obviously we mentioned before, he's got 89% pass accuracy in the Serie A, which across all of Manchester United's midfield options is the most. That isn't because he's trying loads of things and pulling them off. That's because for the most part, when I've watched him, he's a very simple, efficient passer. There's a lot of passes that are obviously strung out here to the wing backs. He's got options either side, out of him wide. A lot of the times, they did play Kolasinac a lot of the times at left centre half. And when, that back three shuffles, we're looking to push that left centre half on. And oftentimes you'll see Ederson in these situations receiving outside of the block. Now, that could be tactical instruction. It could be something he's doing on his own, but that does get the better out of him because he cannot, in my opinion, receive back to goal with play here. I watched him against Chelsea, I mentioned once or twice. He doesn't look as comfortable there. The ball gets caught under him quite a lot under severe pressure, but facing forward and running at the opposition's box, I think he's a decent player, and I think he could, have a lot of, pretty unique selling point there when we're talking about, midfielders like Tonali. So I've got another example here against Milan in a goal he scored. So we can see in this first freeze frame here, Ruggieri's got the ball. Now, Ederson is behind Yusuf Fofana in this first screenshot. Look how many bodies are ahead of him for AC Milan. I think there's like 8 or 9 bodies there. Now, if you fast forward this play, he actually ends up receiving the ball in the box, diving header to score this goal. So I think personally, if we're looking for a box-to-box player, he could do a job there. The problem is for me is Manchester United around Kobbie Mainoo need a lot in terms of having him play box to box. If he is to play this box to box and if he's pushed forward like this and we've got Kobbie Mainoo in the centre like this on his own, with them runs that he's making off the ball, if you just look at the rest of defence of Manchester United, we've got potentially Maguire, Aiden Heaven, Lenny Yoro, Kobbie sitting in front, Luke Shaw, Mazraoui. This could all be developed on for sure. It's not the best in terms of when the ball comes the other way. So for me, that is something to watch out for. He's better head-up facing play. He's an old school, robust, number 8, box-to-box, doesn't get involved, in my opinion, a lot with the deep build-up, doesn't touch the ball that much throughout games. And if he does, you're not going to see something that's worth 40 million. But if you actually look at some of his carrying, if you look at some of the way he handles himself in duels, some of his late arrivals into the pressure, I think you'll see something pretty interesting there. So I want to show you, just before we move on, some of the build-up concerns that I've had with Ederson when watching him. So we've just spoke about him receiving outside the block and dropping down into this left centre-half spot. Now, I'll show you on your screen right now. This is a situation against Como in the first 2 minutes. Como, very high pressing team under Cesc Fabregas. So we can see here, Ederson right in the centre of midfield. This is where Kobbie Mainoo would play for Manchester United. He's took the ball just on the edge of the box and we can see that pressure's immediately arriving on his back. He tries to dribble himself out of that pressure, gets closed down, he takes too long to make a decision. It's a deep turnover and the opposition get a chance from this. This is something that I don't think the data will tell you that much because he doesn't want to be in this situation here. But when he is, he doesn't really look orthodox. He doesn't look like someone who can take the ball in these deeper positions. So I think it's really interesting when United are profiling him to be this number 6, to be this Kobbie Mainoo partner. I think he's being put there for robustness, for legs, for duels. I don't think he's someone who's going to fill that passing void, which leaves us to talk about the next 2 midfielders Manchester United have to sign have to be outstanding players on the ball. And I'm still hoping in my heart, and I'm sure a lot of yous are as well, there's 2 more to come with this signing. And them 2 more, in my opinion, have to be more ball-tentative players. They have to want the ball. I'm also going to show you this example against Bologna, the 1-0 down. This is a ball just dropping out of the air, and his first touch on 78-58 is so loose that it actually completely turns a Atalanta possession into a turnover, and Bologna can have a direct attack at this. If I'm just talking about these first touch issues, these issues under pressure, these things cannot be replicated. When I've watched him against English opposition in the Champions League, the number one thing when we're looking at a player from Italy especially is, can he match the physical standard? So I went back and watched the game they played against Arsenal, which they drew 0-0. And he was pretty good in this game. And I'm talking about handling himself physically, like capability-wise. Can he ride contact? Can he make them darts against Premier League opposition? Can he do the stuff that I'm thinking is his unique selling point? And we've got this example here. We can see he's receiving outside the block again. We can see that he's facing forward. He's not, asking to receive the ball under pressure. He's not between the lines. He's outside the blocks and he's already scanning. He takes a first touch, knocks it past Kai Havertz, and then the second picture on your screen right now is him making a deep run between Arsenal's right back and right centre half. He drives into the box, knocks it past Arsenal's midfielder, and ends up winning a penalty here against Arsenal. And this, for me, is where he needs to be playing. He needs to be a head-up, forward-facing player with space ahead of him, because I do think it's very hard to do this when players signing from Italy. I do actually think he's got good physical level. I think he can compete really well. I think he's very fast. I think he's very durable. I think he's very robust. And to be honest, when I watch him, he profiles a little bit more like a box-to-box, a little bit more of an attacking midfielder. When you're playing with a 3 at the back, when you've got 2 in front, there's so much demanded of these 2 in here. I mean, we've seen it under Ruben Amorim. There's so much demanded of these 2 here to show for the ball, because you've not got 4 here. You've only got 3. So they are asked to do a lot more ball carrying, a lot more ball playing. Whereas if you've got a 4 with Ederson ahead of them stood in here, I think you'll see a little bit better of a player. And for 38 million in this market, I don't think it's an outstanding deal. I don't think it is. I think you always want your players to be really efficient on the ball. But when I watch him, I don't think he's an incredible ball player. But I think where he brings his quality is the physicality, the off-ball running, the aggressiveness. I think his levels, I want to stress this enough. I tried to say this on social media. I was really disappointed that I seen a little bit lesser of a player on the ball. But the more I got to watch him against the English opposition, he can hack the standard in terms of running. And it's not a Manuel Ugarte type player where they are physically not capable to ride contact, to drive through midfield. He can bounce players and he can run and he can get his legs across and he can duel well. And oftentimes, yes, sometimes he can lose the ball in here. But I think when the play's a little bit more neck and neck, I think his dueling is pretty decent. And that was even in the Champions League games. I think he's a really old school box-to-box player and someone who's a very unique profile and archetype in this game. And yeah, I think there could be 2 more additions on top of this, and I really hope there is, and I really hope that them 2 players are more ball-to-feet kind of players. I'm talking like an Anderson, a Fernandes, them types of players who can dictate games next to Kobbie Mainoo, who can offer you different dynamics. But for me, I think there is a lot to be liked and there's a lot to be concerned with, and I fully understand it. But to just encapsulate everything we've talked about here, I've got this example against Dortmund away in the Champions League. This is a game that Manchester United very much could be playing next year. But as we can see here, Dortmund go long from the Atalanta pressure. The first ball's won. Ederson latches onto that second ball straight away, looks to knock it past 2 Borussia Dortmund players, gets through, barges them out the way, which is where I'm looking for that physical edge. Can you get in front of players? Can you win them 50-50s? He does. He plays this lovely little stab pass with the outside of his foot and again makes a really lovely dart behind that Dortmund back line, receives the ball in the end, and it's a shot that doesn't end up turning into a goal on this occasion. But for me, I do think this is someone who could offer Manchester United a different dynamic. I'm not going to be relying on him next season in terms of him to be the starting midfielder. I don't think that's what he's being brought in to do. And I think that's where a lot of the head loss from certain Manchester United fans is coming in. And don't get me wrong, him being the first signing has obviously had a direct thought in Manchester United fans' heads about what they want from the midfielders. But I think he's a really decent option. There are multiple concerns. I think, obviously, the technical stuff, yes, I do agree with. I do also think that he's got 1 year left on his contract, so people are curious still about the fee. Why is he not being looked at by other clubs? I know Atletico Madrid were looking at him in January. Why is he not being called up to Brazil consistently? There are a lot of concerns with this player, but I do think in the right environment with the right sort of players behind him, he will be pretty decent in terms of a head-up, box-to-box runner who can offer you a different dynamic to your Kobbie Mainoo's and your Fernandez's. And yeah, I think more importantly as well, if we're talking about Manchester United, if I just bring you over to this, the 4-2-3-1 in here, obviously Manchester United have most of the time pressed in a diamond, which has looked a little bit like this with Bruno Fernandes, Sesko in there, one sitting just behind covering the opposition's midfield. So when they've got the ball, two centre forwards like that, the midfielders are a little bit more narrow to block the centre. And if this is going to be Ederson, this is okay. This is pretty decent because, as I've mentioned multiple times, I think his aggression is really good for the Premier League. I think his first step is really good. I think he can use his body quite well. And yeah, I think he's more of an alternative, different dynamic sort of player than the other midfielders we've been looking at. And I think Sandro Tonali is the closest of the midfielders that we've been linked to that I can compare him to. Judging his physical adaptation across Serie A to the Premier League, similar to Tonali as well, that's where the grey areas come. Because for me, if he can't carry that physicality over to Manchester United and over to the Premier League, then who knows? He could look like a very, fish out of water kind of player. But for me, I've seen enough in his physicality to think that he can offer that different dynamic in certain games. And I think the late box running, I think he runs off the shoulder. He's got this really unique, because he doesn't really have a left foot, and he's got this really unique stabbed pass of the outside of his foot where he almost like toe pokes it with the right side of his boot. And that kind of throws defenders off guard a little bit when they're looking to 1v1 him, and then he can burst round them with a run. He's a very 1-2 touch player in terms of play off him and give him the ball back when he makes that running behind. And I hope that he will add just a little bit more presence in the opposition's box. And I think that's why when I'm talking about him, I think a lot of the stuff that's been said about him is a little bit wrong in terms of my opinion, because I think you're looking at him in a 3-2 base for an Atalanta team. I don't really think this suits him at all, really. I don't think he's a player who links play efficiently. I don't think he's a player who drops the shoulder well. But what I do think he could do is spin off like this and become a real presence between the line in terms of, can he take the ball right here, head up, face in play, and combine with players inside and make runs into the box? But think of Manchester United under Michael Carrick. We do love the fact that Casemiro's being freed up as that more box-to-box option. We've seen him score so many goals. And I do think Ederson could replicate a little bit more like that. But again, I don't think he is the Casemiro replacement. I think we just need depth in terms of midfield depth, but also running in behind depth. And I think his physical standard, from what I've seen against English opposition, against the best teams in Serie A, against the likes of Arsenal, I was really struggling in the first couple of days because I was judging him a lot on this technical stuff in front of the defence. Can he play? Can he drop the shoulder? How good is he on the ball? All that kind of stuff. And he doesn't really strike me as a very, very good player at that. But when his head-ups face in play, there's a lot to actually like and get behind. I just hope that Manchester United value him as that sort of player. There are obviously drawbacks with that in terms of leaving Kobbie in here. That means obviously Manchester United might look at Kobbie as more of a deep liar, more of a number 6. But I think they've just looked at. We've been interested for this player for years, and I think they've always looked at him as his physical output. How fast is he? How can he win duels? And I've looked across the majority of the games he's played in Europe against the English opposition, and his dueling matches up quite well. He's not really being bullied. I mean, I watched a game against Real Madrid. Jude Bellingham and Vinny Jr. were making really good runs down the sides of Atalanta's centre-halves, and he was tracking them so deep into his own box and matching the pace and still getting a leg in, still getting an arm across. And that, for me, is where I look at Manchester United's midfield problems over the last few years. The number one, we've never really looked at a Manchester United midfielder and think they lack they do lack technical ability sometimes, but majority of the time when it goes wrong for a midfielder at United, they can't run, they can't get there. When we look at Van der Beek, we look at Ugarte, they're not doing the hard work. I mean, United fans have looked back on Fred and gone, well, at least he ran really hard and can compete. If I look at Ederson, he's 6 foot, he's pretty upright, he's pretty strong, he's got a great first step on him in terms of acceleration and burst. He's got really good ideas when it looks to crash in the opposition's box. I think all of the precautions and all of the stuff that come around the signing of him comes down to the other two midfielders. As a first midfielder for Manchester United, I can understand the concerns, especially if he is to be used on the edge of the box like this, taking the ball. I really worry in these situations, but head-up facing play, I think you could look at somewhat of a baby Sandro Tonali, someone who can arrive in the box late, offer Manchester United an option to whip the ball into. Even with Sesko in there, I still think Man United's box, now it's lost Casemiro, if you think of that. They have lost a lot of arrivals into there, you know. Brian Mbeumo, Amad Diallo, Mateus Cunha are not really box runners. Sesko is. Bruno Fernandes really isn't. We're looking for someone to add that depth in behind. And I think in some Champions League games, when we're chasing the game, he offers you a little bit more of a different option. He scored quite a lot of headers for Atalanta. If you go and look at his goals, his catalogue's pretty good in terms of what I'm saying here, in terms of him arriving behind the opposition's defence, in terms of him getting on the back post, in terms of him offering something on set pieces. And I think they've just looked at this and gone, he could match the standard physically, and we can worry about the rest after. So, yeah, a very, very interesting midfielder for Manchester United in terms of the first midfield signing. There will be more. I need to say this to Manchester United fans. This is not it. This is not the final product. It's not going to be Ederson and Mainu in midfield. But I think it's a different dynamic. And another thing people must remember, that the market is at an obscene level. I mean, I'm not going to judge the signing. Anthony Gordon's just gone to Barcelona for £70 million. We're not in the day and age of £20 million midfielders anymore, in my opinion. And if we're looking at players who are proven on the European level, who can match the physical standard, we're looking at players who are in that Ederson mould. And he offers something different. The other two midfielders have to be them ball players, because for Manchester United to conduct games under Michael Carrick, control them, not lose control in games against a lesser opposition, they will need more in there. But I don't doubt that you could see Ederson coming off the bench with 30 minutes to go, adding legs in behind, legs in midfield, stopping defensive transitions. I can understand it in a lot of ways, as long as the other two midfielders are okay. But yeah, and we must not forget, he's played under Gasperini. Gasperini is one of the best man-to-man, coaches in terms of pressing we've seen in the game. And he's got a quote talking about how much he's learned under Gasperini in terms of his understanding of man-to-man pressure, how to press well. I think he's got all the right tools in terms of when we're looking at, if we're looking at avoiding risk as a signing to Manchester United, if we're looking at avoiding risk to the Premier League, I think he's got good physical attributes. The technical stuff really does concern me. I will say that. I think the ball does get trapped under him quite a lot. He takes a little bit too long to release the ball. A lot of options close as he's carrying the ball. As I've mentioned before, he does like to make them good runs off the ball, receiving in front. So if he bounces it off here and gets here, he does make them good runs. But if them runs come when there's a back four ahead of him, sometimes the play can catch up to him and he takes too long. And there's just them little bit of things I'd like to wriggle out, and I think they would get highlighted more in the Premier League. But in terms of a physical standard, I understand it. I understand why Manchester United have done this deal, and I understand it's also not the most sexy, but he can match the standard. And I think he's not a risk-proof, but I think he will give you a bare minimum of level, which at least matches the physical standard of the Premier League from what I've seen. So, yeah, I think he'll be okay. And I think as long as the other two, if we sign two more midfielders, and the midfielders are really good ball players, like Fernandes and Elliot Anderson, let me just say, this signing will become better in my head. You just need to worry about the environment that player's going into. So, yeah, a good Ugarte replacement. And remember that it is a Ugarte replacement, not a Casemiro replacement. So just remember that, United fans. I hope this video has helped you out in terms of understanding what he's good at, in terms of understanding what you should be worried about. But I think it's an okay move. I think it's one that is steady. And yeah, from the wages and fee reported, I understand it. So Yeah, thank you very much for watching this episode of the Overlap Breakdown. If you did enjoy, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and we're back next week for some more analysis. Thank you.